Two words sum up this weekend in mixed martial arts: Bobby Knuckles. Let's talk about his huge victory at the headlining spot of UFC Saudi Arabia, all of the other performances that went well on that card. Then we'll jump into Bellator, where we saw a new champion, and finish it off with the PFL lightweight and light heavyweight playoff bracket happening August 16th. Robert Whittaker, take a bow. I would say that it was ballsy enough for Robert Whittaker to accept a fight against Khamzat Chimaev, an undefeated phenom, victories in multiple weight classes in the UFC, the boogeyman, if you will, of middleweight and welterweight, to be quite frank. He prepares for that fight. He gets a game plan ready for that fight, but then he loses that fight. Khamzat Chimaev, as we know, got pulled due to illness last week off of this card in steps. The man that Khamzat Chimaev has beaten in the past, the only man who has beaten Ikram Aliskerov, as a matter of fact, was Khamzat Chimaev. Ikram, supposed to fight on UFC Vegas 93 last weekend, takes this fight on a week's notice, flies across the world, and gets the biggest step up in competition he has ever had. 15-1, 11 finishes to his name, 2-0 in the UFC with 2 first-round stoppages, a finish on Dana White's Contender Series. Ikram Aliskerov is a very, very dangerous prospect, and Robert Whittaker said yes. Robert Whittaker agreed to put it all on the line. His number 3 spot in the rankings, the value that you get after beating someone like a Robert Whittaker, his status as a title contender, and everything in between. Robert Whittaker was putting on the line here against Ikram Aliskerov. And what happens? Bobby Knuckles knocks Ikram out in 1 minute and 49 seconds. I was standing up to get some pizza, sat back down, and Ikram Aliskerov was asleep on the canvas, and Robert Whittaker was celebrating in the octagon. The first main event ever in Saudi Arabia for the UFC, and it ends in violent fashion. There's not even a lot that you can break down in terms of the fight because, again, it was less than 2 minutes. Robert Whittaker was setting up feints. He got Ikram to bite on him. He analyzed it and capitalized. Bam! Knocked him out. Started with a brutal straight right. Finished it with a nasty right uppercut and some ground and pound strikes that put Ikram away. What a victory for Robert Whittaker. He's now won 3 of his last 4 fights. Aliskerov and Paulo Costa in 2024, and then Marvin Vettori last September of 2022. In between those 3 victories is a loss to the now champion Dricus du Plessis. That was last July when Dricus finished the former champion Robert Whittaker. Now Robert is right back in the driver's seat, right back in the discussion of a middleweight title fight. However, we know that the middleweight title will be defended at UFC 305 August 17th in Perth, Western Australia. DDP, the champion, Dricus du Plessis, will welcome back Israel Adesanya in what will be a year-long hiatus back into the UFC. Israel Adesanya will come, currently sitting at number 2 in the division. They will fight for the middleweight strap. And so it's pretty simple what we have to do. And it's easy because I've already done this same spiel back in, I believe, February when Robert Whittaker beat Paulo Costa. I didn't get it. As a matter of fact, Robert Whittaker and the man I wanted him to face fought 2 different people. But here we are again. I'm recording this on June 23rd, 2024. It's simple. Robert Whittaker took no damage. He needs to go to Perth, Western Australia, be prepared to be the backup fighter in case anything goes wrong in the DDP versus Adesanya fight. And if nothing goes wrong and we get that fight, Robert Whittaker should be scheduled to face former middleweight champion Sean Strickland. It doesn't get more simple than that. Sean Strickland lost his title in January, bounced back at UFC 302 in a 5-round decision victory over Paulo Costa, a former title challenger, and Robert Whittaker beat the very same man in February and now just beat Ikram Aliskerov on 1 week's notice. You have to match these 2 up, and they have to fight as the co-main event at UFC 305. You can't make it any easier than that. The winner of DDP versus Adesanya faces the winner of Whittaker versus Strickland. UFC, Don't make this too difficult. As for Ikram Aliskerov, my hat is off to him for accepting this fight, traveling across the globe on 1 week's notice. Yeah, he got knocked out, but he literally took the biggest step up in competition he's ever had. He had the kahunas to go out there and do this, put his really good record on the line, his prestige, if you will, as a hungry lion, as a prospect on the line, and he fell short. But a lot of people wouldn't say yes to these circumstances on both sides. So I still believe in Ikram Aliskerov. He's 31 years old, entering his prime. I think the future's still bright. You just take a step back with him now, get him someone fringe top 15 or on the outside looking in, and let him go about his business. In the co-main event, Alexander Volkov extended his win streak to 4, the longest active win streak in the heavyweight division right now, with a unanimous decision victory over Sergei Pavlovich, who has now lost 2 straight fights. He fought for the interim title against Tom Aspinall in November, got knocked out in the first round, and now here loses a decision to former sparring partner Volkov. The ship is starting to sink a little bit for Pavlovich, but he's still very dangerous. He just couldn't quite close the gap on the reach of Volkov in this fight, and Volkov was able to stay at range, utilize those long limbs, and really pick apart Sergei Pavlovich. I think the argument can be pretty strong here for Volkov to get the winner of Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades. You know, there's history there with both guys. Both of them have beat Volkov in the past. 4 straight wins, something you don't see too often in this weight class. I think the winner of Blades Aspinall is not only the undisputed heavyweight champion, but I think they defend the belt against Alexander Volkov. Shara Bullet remained undefeated, I believe now 13-0 with 11 knockout victories to his name. It took him till the very end almost. He finishes the fight. He finishes Antonio Trocoli 2 minutes and 27 seconds into the third and final round. Shara Bullet is a dangerous, dangerous fighter with a very, very strong arsenal of weaponry in the stand-up realm. At middleweight, he is a very, very, very promising fighter to watch as they continue to build him fight by fight. And in the light heavyweight division, Volkan, no time, Oezdemir turning back the clock. The way that he used to do things en route to his title opportunity against Daniel Cormier many moons ago, he finishes Johnny Walker in 2 minutes and 28 seconds. He's now won 2 straight fights, a submission over Bogdan Guskov, and now a knockout over Johnny Walker. He will inch closer to the top 5 in the light heavyweight division. One more big victory for Volkan, especially if it's a finish, could throw him into the mix of a 205-pound title shot. And last but not least, for the UFC Saudi Arabia card, short notice replacement Felipe Lima steps in to make his UFC debut and becomes the first man to beat Muhammad Naimov in the UFC. He ends his 3-fight UFC win streak. Felipe Lima, 13-1, 7 finishes, only 26 years old, has not lost since his professional debut in 2015, which was 9 years ago. So if my math is right, 26 minus 9, yeah, he made his pro debut when he was 17. And from the UFC, we will jump to Bellator Dublin. There's not a ton to discuss here. Dare I say the biggest storyline coming out of this fight was Conor McGregor.
What?
In the Bellator Dublin main event, Jason Jackson actually lost his welterweight title in his first defense. Now, he won the belt last year when he finished the then undefeated, I should say, Yaroslav Amazov, who was 26-0, if I'm not mistaken, going into that fight. Then transferred over to the PFL champion versus champion with Bellator card in February, finished Ray Cooper in an amazing performance. But here in Dublin, it was his first actual title defense, and he drops it to the now 13-0 Ramazan Kuramagomedov. Now, this was a very close fight, I believe 48-47 across the board. I saw some scorecards going around on Twitter that had 3 rounds for Jason Jackson. Full transparency, I didn't get to see this fight all the way through. I had the Robert Whittaker fight on. That one ended. I was at a birthday party. I tried to change over to HBO Max to see the rest of this card. Connection wasn't good. It was stopping and going, stopping and going. From what I saw, Ramazan was owning most of the fight, the control time, the transitions, the sequences, etc., etc. So if you got to see this start to finish, let me know in the comments below who you thought came out as the welterweight champion. But there has been an official title change as we head into the second half of the year. Bellator does not have another event until September, so nothing in July, nothing in August. Bellator champions Ramazan Kuramagomedov is now part of that list. And throughout the rest of this card, we actually saw 6 other submission victories. Arlene Blenko submitted Sinead Kavanaugh. Derek Kelly got a submission win. Nathan Kelly got a submission win. Shinobu Ada got a submission win. Michelle Montague got a decision win. And Nate Kelly, not to be confused with Nathan Kelly, of course, in an amateur flyweight fight to kick the night off, 19 years young, he got a submission in the first round. The 3 biggest storylines outside of the main event are as follows. Conor McGregor, yeah, you heard that right, Conor McGregor, Paul Hughes, Nate Kelly. So we'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top. Nate Kelly, as I just said, I believe 19 years old. Let me fact check that real quick. Real quick. What am I, a damn duck? Anyway, he's 4-1 as an amateur with 3 straight submission victories. One of them in the PFL, 2 fights in Bellator. So the guy's racking up good amateur experience. Look for him to make his pro debut soon and with the Bellator/PFL. Next is Paul Hughes. He was a huge free agent signing earlier on in 2024 for Bellator. He is a young prospect from Belfast, Ireland, 12-1 with 9 finishes to his name, and he knocked out Bobby King in the second round of their fight. He is now 1-0 in the Bellator cage. Paul Hughes, a very, very promising star, if I dare to say, in the Bellator promotion from Ireland, from Europe, from the United Kingdom. And last but not least, another Irishman was not only in attendance, but was in the Bellator cage, getting more interview time and screen time than some of the winners from the card. Conor McGregor was there. He had an interview with Dan Hardy. He had an interview that went up on Bellator's own YouTube channel that outdid all of their other videos from Fight Night and just all kinds of other media that he went on and discussed. But he had the interview with Dan Hardy that says he wants to be 100%, no more going into fights injured, not feeling his best. He wants to feel perfect and fight perfect. The toe is healing as it should. He said there is a date for his fight already. Obviously, that hasn't been announced by him. It hasn't been announced by the UFC, but him and Michael Chandler looks to be all go. It's just a matter of finding a date. But I just found it funny that he wasn't at the press conference at this very same arena in Dublin, Ireland, but he was damn sure in attendance for the Bellator fight card and to corner Sinead Kavanaugh. So Conor McGregor gives us an update. We see him on screen for the first time in quite some time, and it's with Bellator, not with the UFC, not with his own social media, with Bellator. And last but not least, we head over to the PFL. Again, fight by fight, not necessarily going to break down every single one of them. There were only 4 finishes on the night with 8 decisions, and a lot of those decisions weren't all that great. But we will talk about the playoff race, what the standings are for these fighters that will be competing in Hollywood, Florida, August 16th. For the playoffs for the lightweight and light heavyweight divisions. Impa Kasanganay will be the number 1 seed and look to go back-to-back PFL championships. In order to do so, he will first have to face and defeat Josh Silveira, who was in the playoffs last year, and the 2 and 3 seed, Rob Wilkinson and Dovletsdan Yagshimuradov. Wilkinson beat Silveira, who is now fighting Impa, and Dovletsdan beat Simon Biong in a decision victory. So the 2 guys that got the decisions are facing each other. Impa was one of 2 men in the light heavyweight division that got finishes. I had a worry on the preview show where all 5 of the big winners got first round stoppages in April. What's going to happen this time around? There were 3 decisions and then 2 finishes. Sadibou C got the other finish, but it wasn't enough to break in for the former welterweight PFL champion. But good for him to get back in the winning side of things. He beat and knocked out short notice replacement Andrew Sanchez. So Impa Kasanganay at the top of the leaderboard, looking to go back-to-back. And for the lightweights, we will actually see a former Bellator title contender, Brent Primus, as the number 1 seed. He will be taking on Cassius Clay Collard. That is a very, very fun matchup. And 2 seed Godzi Rabadanov will take on 3 seed Michael Dufault. So Clay Collard actually lost in the main event to former Bellator fighter Mads Burnell. It was a unanimous decision for Burnell. Wasn't enough for Burnell to get in, and it wasn't enough for Clay Collard to fall out. So Clay is back in the PFL playoffs. And then as we go down the rest of the list, Brent Primus got a finish over Solomon Renfro. It was a submission in round number 3, and Gadzi Rabadanov beat the undefeated Elvin Espinoza. And then Michael Dufour, who was the number 1 seed coming into this second stretch of fights, actually lost in the third fight of the night to Adam Piccolotti. So 2 of the 4 fighters that made the playoffs for the lightweight division actually lost their last fight as they head into August. I still think that's a weird dynamic, but it is what it is. The playoffs are now set for the heavyweights, the light heavyweights, the lightweights, and the women's flyweights. We now will await the final 2 divisions, featherweight and welterweight. So be sure to give me all of your thoughts on this weekend's MMA action in the comments below. What did you think of Robert Whittaker's performance over Ikram Aliskerov? Do you want to see him face Sean Strickland next in a number 1 contender fight on the very same card as Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis? Would you score the main event of Bellator Dublin? Should there have been a new champion, or should Jason Jackson remain and still? Plus, tell me all your thoughts on Conor McGregor making a debut. Was that his debut on the Bellator Promotions TV broadcast? Honestly, it might not be. He's been in bare knuckle, now Bellator, UFC. The guy's been everywhere. And last but not least, give me your thoughts on the light heavyweight and lightweight race in the PFL. Who's going to take it in the 205-pound division? Who's going to take it in the 155-pound division? And everything in between. Be sure to join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA. Follow the show on Spotify, Apple, and more. If you like audio podcast episodes, they release every Friday and Monday. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you in the next video. We've got PFL upcoming and UFC 303, so another big week in the sport of MMA. You can catch it all right here at the Below Average Joe's MMA Show.